In mere days, teams will take the field to gear up for the 2025 college football season, and we are here to preview conference by conference as we go along. This is the College Game Day podcast. Rece Davis and Dan Wetzel today as Pete Thamel is celebrating the arrival of his beautiful new baby daughter, Tegan Amelia Thamel. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, 19 inches. Pete is there helping Kate, or keeping everything calm, keeping it between the ditches, keeping his eye on what's going on in college football, I'm sure, while he is still taking care of Tegan. And Dan, Pete sent me a photograph from just shortly after Tegan was born. He's holding the baby. Pete is wearing a Cal sweatshirt or Cal hoodie, and he assured me that he was telling young Tegan that the whole damn world is bear territory. Now, he said she was intrigued at the start. Have you heard from Pete since the new arrival?
I did. He texted me and asked how Mac Media Day was, and I told him to go back to help Kate. He does not. We love Pete. He's fired up. How'd Mac Media Day go? What'd Toledo say? I mean,
maybe he's just looking for teaching moments, not only for Tegan, but Teddy, who already knows animals inside out. Teddy can identify various species of animals better than I can, but maybe we're now going to get him down into the lower rungs of college football. I don't mean that derogatorily, but not the Power Four.
Can you name all 13 members of the MAC? I mean, there's a lot of really good college football teams, fans that can't do that. So if that might be what Pete is teaching as a bedtime story. Anyway, we congratulate he and Kate and the whole family.
Well, we're going to start today, Dan, with these conference previews with the Big Ten, a conference which is home to the last 2 national champions, the conference which during its own media days had coaches feeling some bravado, having Penn State's James Franklin refer to the SEC as that other conference, which led to a pretty good tweet from Greg Sankey complete with logo of TOC, that other conference. Mm-hmm. So the rivalry is on, but right now the Big Ten is king of the mountain. When you win championships back-to-back with your 2 most powerful brands in back-to-back years, you have the right to crow, and they will. And as I look at this, I feel as if there are probably 4 teams in the Big Ten that I believe have the opportunity to make the college football playoff, a good opportunity, and if so, then that by definition makes them national championship contenders. Would you go that deep in the Big Ten?
To make the playoff, I would go deeper. I don't know that they'll get more than 4, which is an interesting number.
I guess I should have said it this way. I have what I've deemed them as contenders at the top, teams that I view as national championship threats. Then I've got another tier of about 4 that are sleepers that I could see making the playoff, and then a couple more on the outside that would be more in the Arizona State category, might be good, but would kind of come from nowhere. Maybe that's a clearer assessment of how I look at it.
I would say this then, in terms of who do I think can win a national title, my number would be not as deep. It may only be 1.
And would that be Penn State or Ohio State?
That would be Penn State. Ohio State. There's, you went through SEC. SEC has all these quarterbacks back. Mm-hmm. Big Ten does not. They have a couple. Drew Aller, obviously Penn State, Luke Altmaier at Illinois, some Dylan Raiola, some good quarterbacks back. But it's not like they're just flush with these veteran quarterbacks. So I would say certainly Penn State's got this on paper. Ohio State is, I think they're only bringing back 6 starters, if that. Mm-hmm. Now, is that second team really good? Yeah. The guys they bring in really good? Yes. But there's a lot of prove it there. I would say there's 6 or 7 that could make the playoff. A true title contender, 1.5. We're going to have to see a lot. Someone's going to have to step up and do a lot after Penn State to, on paper, make me say, yeah, Buckeyes are going to repeat. Possible, but that would be quite a season for Ohio State.
I agree with all of that. I do think because of the quarterback uncertainty around the country, I even think that there are teams that are, semi-returning starters in the SEC, for instance, where you still want to see a little bit more. I still don't know for sure what Georgia has at quarterback. I believe Texas is going to be great at quarterback, but still need to see it. That is the case for some of these Big Ten teams. As you mentioned, it's not the case for Penn State. Penn State returns Drew Aller, but even with Drew Aller, Dan, I think there's the feeling, okay, we saw some growth last year, but then that unfortunate play late in the game against Notre Dame, unfortunate from a Penn State standard, has loomed over him. Is he going to make the biggest play in the biggest moments? Yet they returned two great running backs, got a receiver from USC and Kyron Hudson, the two running backs, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, both 1,000-yard type guys and should be again. They got a receiver from Syracuse and a Draper Pena who had nearly 1,000 yards receiving. So they've got that. They've got the offensive line. They've got some key weapons, even with the loss of Abdul Carter. They've got everything you would want to win a national championship. So why do I feel like they still need to get over the hump? Even making the semifinals last year, they had a really good draw as playoff draws go. I still feel like there's a little bit of I want to see it there.
Well, as they would say on a different ESPN show, they ain't played nobody, Paul. They ain't beat nobody. Okay. This is it's a fascinating season. And I'm going to step back just a little bit. We talked on a different pod. The top two teams in the country everyone has right now is Texas and Penn State. I've never seen a season where the focal point on a single player, in this case Arch Manning, we've seen this happen where one quarterback dominates. What's going to happen? But it's usually a returning star. It's a Johnny Manziel. It's a Tim Tebow. It's someone who's done a lot. We don't know how good Arch Manning is, yet he's the focal point of the season. Very interesting. And then on the converse, you get Penn State. The focal point of the season on paper, fantastic. They look like what Michigan did 2 years ago, Ohio State did last year. Bring everybody back. Unfinished business. Have 20-something potential NFL players, right? Loaded all over the field. Everything is there on paper. The problem is we're sitting there saying the team that hasn't beaten anybody, the program that hasn't beaten anybody, 1-15 against top 5 opponents under James Franklin is now going to beat everybody. And so is this program, as good as it is on paper, ready to make that step where they have learned how to go in and win the big game, and in this case, win 3 or 4 of them next season? We have not seen that from Penn State. It's very fair to say you got to prove it. James Franklin talks about it. He says it's fair. He's got tough skin because of it. His point is always, hey, 95% of the programs would love to be Penn State. He's absolutely right. It's a tremendous program, but you're trying to be the top 1% right now.
I haven't won a national championship since that 86 game against Miami, the famous game where they sort of took Testaverde apart in the Desert and Fiesta Bowl 1-2. They haven't won the Big Ten since 2016, the year they missed a playoff because they lost a non-conference game to Pitt and got demolished by Michigan in the regular season, and it kept them on the outside looking in despite the fact that they won the Big Ten. But last year I felt like was a positive step for sure for Penn State to finish with 13 wins and lose in the semifinals to Notre Dame. And I have them preseason overall in the country. I'll start them at number 2. I'm going to have Clemson preseason number 1, but I'll have Penn State right there. Here's what I suspect happens. I suspect Penn State loses at Ohio State in November in the regular season. The predictable wailing commences about Penn State and just what you talked about, can't win the big one. Will still make the Big Ten championship game and avenge the loss and win the Big Ten and split likely with Ohio State. Which brings us to the Buckeyes. It is a really interesting thing, and I just came back from Columbus yesterday as we record this. There is that proverbial feeling of this team hasn't done anything. We want to prove it ourselves. We're a little tired of hearing about last year's team. But the other thing I think that happens, Dan, is that they've stockpiled talent to the degree that a lot of these guys have had a chance to mature. They've gotten bigger, stronger, and now they have their opportunity. There will be a hunger there. The biggest question with them is quarterback. And while I think everyone assumes, and perhaps this will turn out to be the case, that because of recruiting reputation that Julian Sayin will end up being the quarterback at Ohio State, 5-star guy from California, started his career going to Alabama and when Nick Saban retired. Sayan quickly then went to Ohio State. Was on the team last year as a backup. But Lincoln Kienholz is in this battle. A little bit of a later developing kind of guy. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's a better runner. Learning to play the quarterback position, whereas Sayan sort of came up in the traditional for modern times way, all the throwing camps and everything. And Kienholz is sort of using his prodigious athletic ability to become that. I even heard someone say, and they weren't comparing level of talent or saying that he was going to be this. They were simply talking about the trajectory of the development and compared it to Joe Burrow, who, when Joe Burrow was at Ohio State, was not what Joe Burrow was by the time he was a senior at LSU, and certainly, what he's become now is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But they said that growth pattern was on a similar trajectory in terms of needing to develop and learn how to play quarterback at that level. And, I think a lot of it for Ohio State is going to be who wins the locker room, because you can't fool the players. The players know who the quarterback should be, and whoever wins the locker room between those two guys will probably end up being the guy that Ohio State will rely on if they want to make a run to go back to the playoff and potentially try to repeat.
Well, I agree with that. It has not been settled. Ryan Day's been really clear about that. We're going to find out in camp. The good news for whoever comes out of that and wins that locker room, also in the locker room, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, that'll make a quarterback look pretty good when you're throwing to those two guys. I expect, obviously, Smith's going to be Jeremiah Smith. Carnell Tate's going to benefit from the double teams that are going to be thrown on Smith. So there's just so much there. I just think Ohio State always has players. I mean, they're always going to have players. They recruit at an extremely high level. They stockpile players. They get kids that want to go through the Ohio State program and build up, and they follow this path and say, hey, look, if I do this, I'm going to be first round picks. They have got that proven, particularly really for 50 years, but particularly since Urban Meyer got there. However many years ago that was. So they are loaded with players. They probably have the best offensive player in the country in Jeremiah Smith. They very well may have the best defensive player in the country in Caleb Downs. I am not worried all about that. I think the only real question mark, who's quarterback, they had a great running back duo last year. They split it 50-50, both 1,000 yards rushers. How do you replace that? You also have two new coordinators in Matt Patricia coming in, and generally an NFL guy, coming in to be your defensive coordinator. Brian Hartline, the tremendous wide receiver coach, and has done an incredible job recruiting at wide receiver, becoming an offensive coordinator. Ryan Day says the offense won't change. Obviously, Ryan will have probably a great deal to do with that. But you're placing two coordinators and a ton of players. So it's an uncertain year, but this is where the strength of a program, the institutional knowledge of how to win big games matters. And Ohio State has that, not just in, I think the toughness as a program that Ohio State has, the togetherness that they built was on display last year after the Michigan loss. A team that was just a team, a collection of talent, would have faded, gone, forget it, which a lot of people expected. Instead, they lost that Michigan game, as low and as bad of a loss as you're going to ever feel in college football, and they got together and got stronger. That's the sign of a great program. Obviously, that's the one that won the national title. So I'm never going to count Ohio State out of any season, even though I think that, are they possibly not their peak this year? We don't know. We're going to find out. Still question marks.
Well, they lost 14 guys to the draft that tied an Ohio State record. The Michigan thing still hangs over them for sure. I do think there's probably a pretty good lesson for this era of college football. You do want to win those rivalry games. They are terribly important to people, and they should be. They're important to all of the fans, to television, all of those things, because it's the DNA, it's the fabric of the sport. It's what separates it as much as it can be separated, which is not as big a degree of separation as it used to be. from the NFL or from other professional sports, the be-all, end-all feeling of those rivalry games. With that being stated, the court stipulating to the importance of that, it was a pretty good lesson last year that the sky doesn't fall no matter which individual game you lose, no matter how catastrophic. I think often of the number of people who called into the various radio shows and said, I don't, immediately after the Michigan game and prior to the first playoff game against Tennessee, called in and said, I don't care about the playoff. I don't care if we win the national championship. I would rather go 1-11 and beat that school up north. I'll bet that's not how they really felt that night after they beat Notre Dame and raised the big trophy. Don't mean to diminish Michigan's accomplishment, nor do I mean to diminish the importance of winning that game. You need to beat your rivals. That's part of the deal in college football. But you can't make it everything. And in the last decade, thinking back toward the end of the season, over the last decade, Dan, we've had two national champions lose their biggest rivalry game, at least two. Maybe I'm thinking of another one, but the year that Tua hit Devontae Smith against Georgia in the national championship game, that team lost to Auburn. And now Ohio State, in much more catastrophic fashion because of the levels of the teams, Auburn in 2017 and Michigan last year, much more catastrophic loss for Ohio State. And yet they still ran through and dominated the playoff for the most part.
I think it's particularly needed at Ohio State. I went in that last year. They take this thing too seriously. The team up north, we won't say Michigan.
Crossing out Michigan, all the M's on campus.
Crossing out the M's on campus. Yeah. If you walk around Ohio State's campus the week of the Michigan game, it is crazy. I park, you probably have like a limousine pull you right into the shoe. You get a nice spot. When I cover a game, I park like the sixth. Jerry Emick takes care of us. Sixth floor of some parking garage, right? And it's like, it's called like the whatever, like the Murphy parking garage. And you walk in and the M on the sixth floor, like they've got every M. This is like the last M you would cross out. This one, it's not. No one sees it except the people with the bad parking. And there it is. They got a X out. The Ryan Day last year before this game said losing to Michigan, and I'm paraphrasing, but this is it. Was as painful as the death of his father. Like this thing needed to be relaxed. I think it just became overwhelming of late, and I think that they all talk like we can't lose, like they're trying to impress, like they're trying to be more hardcore than the most hardcore fan, right? Bucknut 83, who's sitting at a bar stool in Sandusky, complaining about this. You can't outdo them. I think Michigan has had a better understanding of it. They're not afraid to say the word Ohio. It's okay, right? They take it very seriously. They want to win, but I don't think anybody was just going to, pass out if they didn't do it. So I thought the intensity of that game had gotten overwhelming, and that's probably why they lost the game. It contributed to a game where this was a complete mismatch, and Ohio State should have won. So I think actually what's gone through is a little bit, a little helpful for them. And, banning the planting of a flag at Ohio. I don't know. Did they ever get that legislation through? We always love crazy Ohio legislations, college football legislations, all that. Take a deep breath. I know it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's good. Ryan Day needs to win this thing, but it's okay. There is life after it, and they proved it. So I think maybe I just feel like in Ohio, this thing needs to simmer down just a little bit.
It's fun until it's not. I mean, all of this sounds like great college football lore and neat little things that brilliant writers like you will put to kind of take us to the romanticized period of this era of college football. And when it becomes overwhelming and it becomes debilitating, and when it impacts performance, which in my judgment, it most certainly did in that game last year, even coaching performance, even with Chip Kelly. And I'll go away from the XO here last year. What is the one advantage on the entire field? The one advantage that Michigan had XO matchup last year? Their
defensive line.
Defensive tackles against Ohio State's offensive line. And yet, after that first drive where they did throw it around, I think I remember going back and watching and charting, I think they They threw it 5 of the first 6, or had passes called, at least 5 of the first 6 snaps, came out as if they were going to do it that way. Then they got a little stubborn. We were going to show that they were tough enough to impress the guy from Sandusky. They're sitting there. I'm going to show them. We're going to run over them. We're not afraid of Mason Graham. We're not afraid of Kenneth Grant. And it backfired on them. They played right into Michigan's hands. Then they tightened up. Then they made a couple mistakes, and then it got away. But they overcame it. They won the championship. And I think you're dead on. It was almost like a pressure cooker release valve. It's like it might have released some of the pressure, and now Ohio State will have a chance to play to its capabilities when that game comes, perhaps, and then we'll see.
And we're part of the problem here. We just spent like 6 minutes previewing this season, talking about last season's the loss, right? So apologies to Buckeyes, but yes, Ryan.
But at least we're pointing it and saying good things about it. Yeah,
we're not too bad. But the bit is, well, the winner of the Michigan Ohio State game is whoever runs the ball more, right? More yards. You're tougher team. Look, it wasn't that hard to beat Michigan last year. It's really hard to be tougher than Michigan. Being tougher than Michigan, whatever that term even means, not easy. It's a tough team. Beating them last year, not that tough. A lot of teams did that. So go ahead. But yes, I think losing somehow is a good thing. I don't know. Maybe I don't
know. But we'll find out a lot about the Buckeyes and Texas, for that matter, with that opening Saturday game. College Game Day will be there on the 30th for the Longhorns and the Buckeyes. Great way to start the season. And did a preview thing that'll show up on the various ESPN platforms in coming days. And Ryan and Day and I disagreed a little bit, in a friendly sort, about the way the playoff structured, the impact on non-conference games. And we talked about that a little bit as well. I know I've divided this into tiers, and I've gotten very technical with the tiers of how I look at the Big Ten. And those two teams, to me, are the ones most likely to be the national championship college football playoff type contenders. I've got a couple of other ones that I think fall close to the category, but certainly a notch below the two we've just discussed. First is Oregon. The Big Ten not only has had the last 2 national champions, they also had the team that during the regular season last year was the best team in the regular season. Now, Ohio State proved to be the best team in the playoff and over the course of the whole thing by winning the title. But Oregon was the best team in the regular season and did not play well, got boat raced in the Rose Bowl by Ohio State, kind of stuck with them in the offseason, but they're in a bit of a rebuilding situation. New quarterback with Dante Moore, who has some starting experience from a couple of years ago at UCLA. Brought in Mekhi Hughes, who's a 1,400-yard rusher from Tulane. Dan Lanning's done a terrific job in finding guys out of the portal who fit his system. They even got a big offensive lineman that everybody seemed to want in Isaiah World from Nevada to kind of shore up the left tackle spot. They've got good edge rushers. How do you assess Oregon in terms of that? I have them as playoff contender. You get that quarterback thing right, and I think they too potentially could be a national championship contender.
Absolutely agree. And it's a lot of this is going to be on Dante Moore. I'm not worried about Oregon's talent. Oregon's going to have talent, and it's hard. I was bad at predicting seasons back before teams didn't add like 70 guys, and like all their coaching staffs. Yeah. So it wasn't easy before. Here's the thing about Dante Moore, 5-star prospect out of Detroit King High School, goes to UCLA, has a so-so year on a UCLA program that was fading. Chip Kelly bailed on the team to go to be an offense coordinator at Ohio State. That's where that was headed. Didn't really have a fair shake as a true freshman, which is hard enough. I love players, and I remember this in basketball. Coaches used to love players in the old red shirt days, where they really used it as development to get a 5th year. Is a guy who has played a season and then red shirts, because that player, and presumably this applies to Dante Moore, has seen what it takes. He's been knocked down as, hey, I'm a number 1 recruit. Everybody wants me. All of that. It's going to be easy. Gets to college, sees it isn't easy, says, I got to do this, and now has taken a year to develop and is going to be surrounded by talent. I think Dante Moore is going to have a huge year. And because of that, he has great ability. He's now surrounded by better talent. If he does, Oregon's going to be terrific. But that's going to be the question mark. We don't know what Dante Moore will be. I won't put it all on him, but I'm a believer in the Ducks' talent overall.
I think the schedule stacks up. We haven't talked a ton about schedule, but with these mega conferences, the draw that you get, and I'll go on a quick aside here. This is why I scoff in the general direction of all of these people who say, well, we play 9. The SEC and the ACC or whoever have to play 9. And my response is that's fine. I actually think they should play 10. That's neither here nor there, but that's mostly from a content standpoint. This whole 9 versus 8 deal, which 9?
Yeah, which 9?
Which 9? I mean, Indiana's schedule was not like Ohio State's last year. Just wasn't. Ohio State went to Oregon, Penn State. Not the same. And there's no way to make it the same when you have an 18-team conference. So I set that up to say that while Oregon has a very difficult road trip in late September to Penn State, they don't have Ohio State. They don't have Michigan. As I scroll down here, if whatever you think of SC comes to them. They do have to go to Iowa. And, Iowa can be not only a difficult road trip, a little bit of a wild card with the things that they're doing on offense, and they've changed. But I think the schedule sets up pretty well for Oregon, too, to let Dante Moore kind of ease in, get his feet under him, get in sync with Will Stein, their talented offensive coordinator, and then you've got Mateo Uiagalelei, who's going to rush the quarterback on the other side. And weapons will be a question because I know that Evan Stewart, they were really counting on him, the wide receiver who a couple of years ago transferred from A&M. He got hurt. So they're going to be looking for some other weapons, but I think everything sets up pretty nicely for Oregon.
Well, this is the difference in how college football is now with the 12-team playoff. And all the talks about bigger playoff, but this is just the second year of this. It used to be in college football, you had to hit the ground sprinting, right? You basically had to be perfect. Maybe you could lose one game. You had to be ready day one. You don't anymore. It's really about get in and then see where you're at. Get enough that you're in. And so a development across the season, it's not whether this offense is as good as last year's Duck offense. It's not going to be when they're playing Montana State, right? I mean, I'm sure they're going to score some points, but it doesn't have to be perfect early. It has to be good enough to get in. Bill Parcells used to talk in the NFL, just get in the tournament and then see what happens. How are you then? And so a lot of these guys like Moore and a lot of these other quarterbacks we're going to discuss have a season to develop. And how good are they in November? Are they good enough to get there? I agree. The schedule is pretty favorable. I think Oregon should be right there in that mix, and then they could be a very dangerous team when we get to the playoffs.
The other team that I am putting in this group, but barely, it's like they've clawed their way into the bottom of this group, is Illinois. Coming off a 10-win season, they're returning their quarterback and Luke Altmaier, who, capable as a dual threat guy. Depending on how you judge these things, they've got like 19 starters back. Our buddy Phil Steele, who does the preseason thing, he's got this whole big formula that determines what the real experience of a team is and factors in the transfers. And if you buy into that, it at least shows how many guys you have that have produced at this level. Illinois is listed as number 3 in the country on the experience chart. They've got all of their offensive line coming back. They built some confidence with the way it finished last year, but they were 5-1 in one possession games. They did barely escape Purdue. So it is not without some trepidation that I put Illinois in this realm. How do you view them?
Yeah, I it's a similar thing. Bill Conley at ESPN has the continuity table. We all it makes you sound smart, right? When we can talk, yeah. 75% retention of production. Ranked 4th in the country for Illinois, number 1 in the Big Ten. Yeah, it's there. Oh, look, this is what Brett Bielema does. Puts together a good winning team in the Big Ten, and that's what they are. Altmaier has the potential to be really good. The question on the record, yes, 2 overtime games they won. They scored the final play to beat Rutgers. Late possessions, I think final possessions against Kansas and South Carolina a tight game that they took over. I think they won by 2 scores against Michigan. Everything went their way, and we may talk Nebraska later when everything went the other way. Does that little bit return to mean? I don't know, but Gabe Akis is a tremendous defensive line player. This team's stacked. What's the ceiling on a Brett Bielema team? What's the ceiling on this club? And can they get all those breaks? It should be an exciting year in Champaign. I think it's an anticipated year in Champaign. That alone, pretty exciting.
All right. Well, since you brought them up, that brings us to the next tier of teams. And one of the teams in that category, sleeper teams. Now, I kind of have Nebraska borderline sleeper, but I want to do my job as king of the segues and bring in
well done.
The Cornhuskers here. I am a big believer in Matt Rule. If you follow this podcast, when he was after he was dismissed at Carolina, every job that came open, I would say they should hire Matt Rule. They should hire Matt Rule. I even to the effect that the other day when Scott Frost said what he said, the former Nebraska coach and former Nebraska quarterback, who said, I took the wrong job when I went there, sort of throwing a little shade at it. Even the maturity with which Rule handled that. A lot of coaches would have gotten their backs bowed up and talked about, how great everything was, and we're doing this and that, and it's better than it used to be. Instead, Rule did the opposite, showed an extraordinary maturity. We did have some things we needed to improve, and we're doing it now, and we're making it better, and we honor Scott, and we put up a big picture of him. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that can build an organization. I think he's the guy. He's got a quarterback to build around. They've got transfers in now at wide receiver, most notably Dane Key, who came over from Kentucky, has 14 touchdowns in his career. They got Marcus Watson-Trent, who was player of the year in the Sun Belt from Georgia Southern. So they've supplemented his recruiting with transfers. Got a couple guys on the offensive line from Notre Dame and Alabama to come in to help out up front, because that was an issue at times. I can buy Nebraska as a sleeper in the Big Ten.
Oh, absolutely. I am with you on Matt Rule, especially year 3. That's when he made the jump at Temple. That's when he made the jump at Baylor. And what he took over at Temple was a program that never won. He took over at Baylor was a program that had been in complete disarray. They may have lost every game the first year. I can't remember, but it was almost. Sorry,
yeah,
Matt, if you did.
Won one. Yeah, they
got one.
I think. Yeah.
It was, but relentless positivity, relentless common sense. I just always find the way he addresses a lot of things and builds a program. And it's not as easy to build a program these days, but that core is there. And I think you have to do it, particularly at Nebraska. Now you've got that sentiment there. This is the year 3 bump for Matt Rule. Dylan Raiola goes through that first year, learns a ton, no matter how talented you are. Now he's got Dana Holgerson is going to be their offense coordinator, the Mad Mullet of Lincoln now. Put those two together. What do you have? Schedule's a lot more favorable. Again, Cornhusker fans, like, knock on wood, but eventually you're going to win some close games. It's got to happen, right? It's got to happen. These poor Nebraska fans, they're holding their balloons and watching them blow games. At some point, this is going to happen for you. And I am bullish on the potential of Nebraska certainly being there late in this contender role. And that would be very apropos of how Matt Rule has done this. And I'm high on the Cornhuskers.
Dan, I went through, and I should have verified this with our chief researcher, Rece Davis, but I went through and counted just a couple of days ago. Since 2021, and that, that's a little bit before Matt, but sort of to speak to the snake-bitten nature of this program, they are 5-23 in one-score games. 5-20. That's hard to do. And they're minus 47 in turnovers the last 8 years. They haven't had a positive turnover margin since 2016. And they've been terrible in special teams too. So there are things one would think that if you can just clean up some of that, more experience for Raiola is going to clean up some of the turnovers. He only had one interception after Holgerson took over calling plays the last 4 games. So you already saw some growth in that area. think there's a lot of upside at Nebraska this year.
Buy stock.
What do you think? I'll give you first swing at this. We've only talked about Michigan in context of Ohio State. Great that Michigan beat Ohio State. Great that they beat Alabama. It's not the standard, just winning those games. I can see Michigan as a sleeper, but I think they're even with Bryce Underwood at quarterback, the talented freshman, assuming that he ends up playing immediately if he does. I've got a lot of questions about Michigan, even though I'm still going to put them in the sleeper category, but I have some questions there. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, on paper, Michigan's a year away. The question here is, how good is Bryce Underwood? Number one recruit in the country, local player for Michigan, Belleville High School. I saw him play high school football. He's got the guy walks on the field, even when he was about 15, 16, and you just were like, okay, yeah, that's what a number one player in the country looks like. The potential is through the roof. This is an incredible athlete, and he can be a great, great quarterback at the college level. That said, you're a freshman, true freshman. Dylan Raiola was the number one recruit in the country or something close to it. A lot of these guys, it's hard to do. There are not a bunch of identifiable weapons there. There is the strength, kind of like what we talked about with Ohio State. There's that strength of there's a lot of really good players that have been waiting their turn and have built up, and so they should be good. But to me, this is a year of maybe positive transition. I don't think anybody in Ann Arbor, anyone realistic, is sitting there saying we ought to win the national title or make a Final Four or something like that. It's how good is Bryce Underwood? How does he develop? What do we have? Their recruiting is really strong since they got Bryce Underwood. They were recruiting, at least by the recruiting gurus, better than they did most of the time with Harbaugh. Now, Harbaugh once recruited a team with like 24 NFL players. So let's, I don't know what Mikey Sanders was rated, but he turned out pretty good. So there's a lot of really good players that they got. Harbaugh was good at that, but they're recruiting really well. And this is almost like a reset. It's Sharon Moore took over in a tough spot. It was late. Harbaugh left. All these players left. This is almost like year one for him in terms of running the program. He learned on the job last year as the head coach. But how good is Bryce Underwood? And most importantly, how good is Bryce Underwood at noon on the Saturday after Thanksgiving? Because that's going to be a focal point for this season. And how good are they? They can build to that Ohio State game. I suspect he will be a lot better. If he's as good as he potentially is, I think Michigan fans will be quite happy with a good, if that isn't necessarily great season.
With Sharon Moore, the former offensive lineman at Oklahoma, and Harbaugh's DNA still running through the program. They're built on the lines of scrimmage. They don't have a lot of proven experience back on the offensive line. I love the portal addition that they got from Alabama and Justice Haynes. I think stylistically he fits beautifully in what Michigan has done under Harbaugh before Sharon, and now what Sharon would like to do. That week 2 game with Michigan being at Oklahoma and Moore going to serve this 2-game self-imposed suspension down the line. It'll be really fascinating to see him go in on that stage back where he played his college football and see how Michigan stacks up against another team that is in somewhat similar shoes, a big-time brand name team that people have questions about and are ready to see take a step forward. Michigan, obviously, much more recently has been on the mountaintop than Oklahoma. Great week 2 game with Michigan and Oklahoma. While we're on the subject of brand name teams needing breakthroughs in the Big Ten, USC, which seems weird to say USC in the Big Ten even still, but they made the change at quarterback last year, going with Jaden Mayava and Miller Moss moving on to Louisville. They don't have a lot returning up front to protect him. They brought in some transfers in the skill positions. They lost Zachariah Branch to Georgia. They lost some of their key pieces on defense. And you look at the SC schedule, and they have to go to Illinois in conference. They have the road trip to Notre Dame outside the conference, and they have to go to Nebraska later on. But they don't have Ohio State. They have Michigan at home. They have Iowa at home. You have to go to Oregon. This This feels like to me, Trojans were 7-6 last year, Dan. Feels like it's going to be tough to show a ton of improvement from that. Or
Yeah,
are you more bullish on
no,
them?
I'm not. I'm bullish on the program. So Lincoln Riley starts 11-1, and it's like, it's party time. We're back. Trojans are back. 15-13 since then. That's just not acceptable. This is a young team. A lot of underclassmen are going to play big spots. The transfers Lincoln Riley brought in were young. They're recruiting. They may have the number one recruiting class. I think we'll see what they end up with if they can sign it. There's a ton of momentum. Opening a new building. There's a ton of momentum, which is kind of odd for Lincoln Riley's fourth year, and I find that really interesting. Normally, at this point, it's he's truly on a hot seat. He's fighting for his job or whatever. He's got a big contract. It's there. So what do they get out of this year? I think they could be pretty good. I don't know that they're going to be a playoff contender or whatever, but they need to show a lot from some of the younger players, show this program is here, a little like Michigan. Okay, we're a year away, but we're going to be really good. Stick with Lincoln Riley, stick with all these young players coming in. Just a tremendous amount of young talent around the Trojan program, and maybe I think they've readjusted their recruiting strategy both in the portal and in the and in high school ranks, and that's really where USC should be. Rece, we've both been to USC's campus and the Coliseum and LA. You should not want for players. It should not be that hard to get young men 18 to 23 or whatever to say, yeah, I'm going to buy in on this. And I think they finally got that spot. So I think they need to show the potential, win games they're supposed to win, do a little better than 15-13, and the program's on good shape. But I'm not expecting them to make a playoff here.
I'm not either, but if you go back and look at last year and one year to the next, fortunes turn, particularly in this category. It determines who wins the Big 12 every year. How do you do in close games? They were 1-5 in one possession games in the regular season. Now they ended up beating A&M in a one possession game in the bowl, so they ended up being 2-0 against that other conference, the SEC, in one possession games. But they were 1-5 in the regular season, and 5 of their 6 losses came by a total of 19 points. In the Notre Dame game, Notre Dame beat them by 2 touchdowns, but they also had 2 pick sixes in that game, including a 99-yarder.
Yeah,
so
incredible.
It's not as if the Trojans went in last year, even in a 7-6 season, and got blasted every week. They sort of squandered some games. I think it was a Maryland game that they squandered late. Minnesota got them at the horn. Games that they had a chance to finish. Michigan got them. It seemed
they had Michigan beat.
Had them beat on the road, and couldn't quite finish the deal. And now that'll be a big thing. So the next team in this sleeper category is a team that was the ultimate sleeper a year ago, and that's Indiana. Indiana made the playoff, won 11 games, lost at Notre Dame in the first round. Curt Cignetti, they canceled a non-conference series with Virginia, I think it was. They got some flack. Cignetti, took the obligatory shot at the SEC as a result of saying we're going to schedule the way they do, which is, by the way, has no basis in fact, except for teams like Indiana. Hey, Indiana had a great year last year. You're still Indiana. No one has lost more games than Indiana. Who in the world? Why should they? They need to schedule wins. They need to open the checkbook and let's see, who have we got? Who is it this year? And play Old Dominion and Kennesaw State and Indiana State. Because while I think Curt Cignetti is a terrific coach, and the record bears that out everywhere he's ever been, and certainly did last year at Indiana, they're still Indiana. They didn't morph into Ohio State because of one season, and now they've got to go play, this killer non-conference schedule. They're Indiana. It's fine. Schedule whoever you want to. You don't have as much margin for error, but schedule whoever you want. And the schedule within the conference is tougher than it was last year. They have to go. They play Illinois at home. They go to Iowa. They go to Oregon. They go to Penn State. And they also had a veteran team last year I think they led the nation in total defense. They had a plus 15 turnover margin. A lot of things went right for them. They got a great quarterback out of the portal in Fernando Mendoza. I believe in Cignetti. But hey, there's a lot of history working against them, and they've got a lot of new pieces to try to follow up on that brilliant season from last year.
62% retention production on the continuity table. Google it if you want to know. Now, look, I love Cignetti. Cignetti's line about the SEC is so great. He flips it from, hey, we're bailing out of a decent. I mean, we're running from Virginia. You're running from Virginia.
Yeah.
That's not a murderer's row. It's a misdemeanor's row. You just ran, what are we doing? I was on the radio the other night in Huntsville with Wes Neighbors and Steve Moulton, who's just to do a great show. And we're talking about Indiana because he took that shot at the SEC, right? And I go, this is why Cignetti does this. In the history of your radio program, which I think is a pretty long-standing radio program.
Yeah.
How many times did you mention Indiana football until the last year? Like 2 times? Now we're doing a whole segment on how mad we are at Indiana football. Cignetti's a genius. Look, they return a lot of players. I think, let me tell you how chesty they've gotten down there, how excited they've gotten down there in Bloomington. I think people are going to be a little upset that we took this long to get to them on the sleeper list.
I agree. I was thinking the same thing. I don't think there's any question about it. They'll be mad.
Disrespected Indiana now. That's where we're at with Indiana. Look, here's the key to me on Indiana. Fernando Mendoza comes in from Cal, the quarterback. It's going to be surrounded by better players. It's a better situation. It's not this chaotic thing. How good is he? I'm very interested to see what Indiana does this year. I'm not putting anything past them. They did not play a tough schedule last year, but the 2 games they lost, they were in them, and they were to the 2 teams that played for the national title, Ohio State and Notre Dame, and they're both on the road. We'll see. We'll see how they do. But I'm still in on Cignetti, if only for the content. Thank you.
You know what? So am I. And, the thing is, now he brought all of those guys from James Madison, a couple of them still around, great defenders, Mikhail Kamara, Aiden Fisher, still there. D'Angelo Pons had 3 picks last year. And this year, they've added Roman Hemby from Maryland, who I think has over 2,000 yards rushing in his career. Got an offensive lineman from Notre Dame and Pat Coogan, who played a lot for the Irish. It's not as if, they got a down-the-line guy. Got a tight end from Tennessee, Holden Stays, who was at Tennessee and before that at Notre Dame. So they've got some guys who've been around. The continuity is largely on the offensive line. I think they're close to 100 career starts. So, and they even added some weapons. They got E.J. Williams, a wide receiver from Clemson, who a highly touted guy, as I recall, when he got to Clemson. It just never really quite clicked. They even got a guy come back. They got a defensive back to come back from Ole Miss who had been at Indiana. It's like, you know what? That's not so bad in Bloomington. I think I'll go back. So I agree. I don't see them making the playoff, but I don't think, while somewhat tongue-in-cheek, they are still Indiana. They should schedule wins. They should buy wins. It might have been you. Someone brought up recently, look at what Bill Snyder did. He took what was at the time the worst program in the history of college football and turned it into a perennial winner, largely by making sure that they built in some wins. And then, later on, Cignetti can pursue a Notre Dame or Texas series if he wants to. He's year 2, and still Virginia. It's Virginia. We put the Power 4 label on it, and, just because they're in a certain conference doesn't mean that was necessarily going to enhance their overall body of work.
It was the nicest thing anyone said about Cavalier football in like 5 years. Like we have to duck you. We have to go with an easier schedule. They must have been feeling good in Charlottesville at that. That was all right. Yeah. Someone's scared of us. Someone's scared of Virginia football.
I think another team sort of on the cusp of that sleeper. Wouldn't be shocking if you saw this team get into contention is the dean of college football coaches, Kirk Ferentz, in his 27th season at Iowa. They bring in an FCS quarterback and Mark Gronowski from South Dakota State. He won 2 FCS championships. He was a Walter Payton Award winner in 2023. I do not really believe in a starting quarterback's record because while I think Nick Saban has phrased this best, this is the ultimate team game except at one position at quarterback. Even so, even though that's the most individual position in this sport, it's not like a starting pitcher in my judgment. Yet, give credit what credit's due. This cat is 49-6. His teams are 49-6 when he's the starting quarterback. They'll be able to run the ball. They've got some transfers on defense that they hope will help them. They were outgained again last year in Big Ten play, but they were really good, really good in turnover margin, that kind of thing, sort of the quintessential Kirk Ferentz, Phil Parker type defense that keeps them in games. They lost Caleb Johnson, terrific running back. Do you see Iowa sort of sneaking in there now that they've got a productive quarterback who's, accounted for, around well over 100 touchdowns, I think, in his career?
Punting is winning, Rece. Punting is winning. What's really winning, though, is touchdowns. And you bring Gronowski in from Brookings, South Dakota, right? That's where South Dakota State is, I believe so.
Yeah,
I think I nailed that. We roll him in. How good is he? He's better than what they had. Better than what they had. Injuries at QB crushed Iowa of late. Offensive coordinators didn't help. A lot of problems on offense. They're going to score some points, I think. The offensive line is great. I'm feeling pretty confident they have like 7 NFL level tight ends. I feel pretty good about that coming out of there. The outlaw Kurt Ferentz usually has his team. I mean, if they just get any kind of offense, they're going to be pretty good. So where else do you turn but South Dakota State, our savior over there in Brookings? So I'm very excited about the Iowa season. This is going to be a new era of Iowa.
And as you look at the schedule, stacks up pretty nicely. Got to play an Indiana team that we think will be good in Iowa City. Play Penn State at home. Play Oregon at home. They do have to go to USC, and then they finish at Nebraska on the final Friday of the regular season. But
Iowa State too.
Yeah, they're at Iowa State in the non-conference. Yeah. I see. Sometimes when we talk Big Ten, Dan, I forget.
You just think Big Ten.
Yeah,
don't ever forget about the Cy-Hawk.
Well, no, I was only saying it because these non-conference games, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself because they just want them not to matter anyway.
Yeah,
and so they can play, 9 versus 8 with the winner to get 1 for an automatic bid in the playoff. Man, okay.
There's two guys arguing about this on a street corner in Mason City right now. I can tell you, it matters. The Cy-Hawk always matters.
And Iowa State, historically, they've changed it a little bit recently. Iowa State has historically found ways to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory in that rivalry game for sure. So Iowa's had the upper hand historically there. So I think this could be very quietly one of those seasons where, the smart Alex on the internet start saying things like, tell your kids about undefeated Iowa, the way they did a few years ago. So, but this could be a legit good team for the Hawkeyes, maybe a sleeper to sneak into one of those playoff positions.
I agree. I think, look at Ferentz was talking like, think about how excited Kurt Ferentz must be to say this. I know we'll be much improved at quarterback. I mean, that's basically like the Iowa version of hanging a billboard in Times Square. Like that is the hype. That is Ferentz with the hype. So when he's saying that, I feel really good about it.
It's been a long time since I'm thinking back. Brad Banks. Who am I forgetting in between them? I mean, they've had some solid quarterbacks. Like Brad Banks was like a dude. That's been like 2 decades ago. Early in the Ferentz tenure when
it's been a while. It's been a while. I don't know.
I'm sure. Yeah. I know I'm forgetting some guys who probably has careers back or whatever, but like legit big time difference makers. We'll see if Gronowski's that. Certainly he was during his FCS career. Opportunity to do so at the Big Ten level. Let's look at the rest of the conference and do so in a little quicker fashion. A couple of teams together actually 3 that I think could be pretty good, but I don't think I quite have enough confidence to put them in the level of sleeper. Washington, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Any of those 3 teams, any of those three teams intrigue you as potentially being a little bit better than maybe some of their preseason prognostications would indicate?
If I'm going to pick one, it's going to be Washington. Jed Fish was extremely confident about how good he said, I have a good football team at Big Ten Media Days. They have I think it's 20 games. They have a nice home win streak. It has become a very tough place to go up and play and win. Even last year, they won their games at home. And so it was a transition year. He's an excellent coach. He's got built up some talent. And I just think Washington's got a chance to pop up here, and you kind of forget about him a little bit. But I think the Huskies could be a team that bangs their way up into contention there, and do something good this season.
I think Minnesota, they couldn't run a lick last year, which is not good, but they've got good running backs. They've had a really strong defense last year, and they returned some key components of that. I sort of like Minnesota. I might let Wisconsin better, but you want to talk about a brutal schedule. I think they're a little bit back to their identity with Jeff Grimes coming in as the offensive coordinator, with the reliable, violent offense that was built on a lot of hard-nosed running at Baylor, and now he's in there at Wisconsin. But their schedule, man, they play Ohio State, they're at Oregon, at Michigan, at Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, not to mention a trip to Alabama in the non-conference. So, Luke Fickell probably has some scheduling issues there. The rest of the teams in the Big Ten, even though Rutgers is one of the more experienced teams in the country, don't expect a lot from them. They'll be solid. They'll be tough to beat. They'll be well coached under Schiano, and probably not quite enough juice to win the biggest games. I think UCLA is pretty fascinating. Not that I believe a lot in them, but the obvious thing is Nico Iamaleava. And, Sean Foster talked about at Big Ten Media Days that everybody sort of straightened up when Nico came in. They've also got Jalen Berger, who, I think is coming off injuries. They have a ton of Power 4 transfers who didn't get a lot of snaps at their previous stop. So the question is, maybe they just needed to find the right fit in the right spot. Tino Sinceri is getting his chance to run the whole offense. He was with Signetti at Indiana and James Madison, co-coordinator, quarterback coach with Mike Shanahan there. And now he gets a chance to run it. He's got Nico with him. Got to wonder if they can protect Nico. What do you think of UCLA?
Well, I think that, we shall see. But I think the Iamaleava commitment was a turning point for this program. He's an LA kid. He comes back, and this is an excellent addition. He's a good quarterback. He was a good quarterback at Tennessee. Was he a great quarterback? Not yet, but This is a big addition in talent and in local, I think, just pop turning heads. They got 14 kids in the portal to commit after Nico decided to go to Westwood. And, at a higher caliber, at least what coaches are saying, like all of a sudden UCLA got a little bit cooler. And so I think potentially here is a lot. Deshaun Foster's a really interesting guy, really interesting hire. And they're trying to be LA's team, right? And get some of these Southern California players to stay. This is so overall big get. They added a great quarterback, and it's the most important position on the field. He's not going to have surrounded by maybe the weapons he had at Tennessee, but what can he do? He's a very, very intriguing talent. So I think they have the chances for a very good season for UCLA's recent history.
Okay, Michigan State, dreadful on offense last year, but I think they have a quarterback. I think Jonathan Smith is a really good coach. Any progress being shown from Michigan State this year?
So this would have been one of my sleepers for a good season. Okay. Again, we're not going to overdo it, but Aiden Childs, actually, he turned the ball over a ton early in the year. They were not good late at all, but his turnovers started decreasing. I think he only had one in the last 4 games or something like that. Where does he go? When you can return a kid with obvious talent, dual threat, and then Jonathan Smith knows how to build quiet programs, build it up. This is what he did at Oregon State. How much better are these guys they've had in the system? They get he gets his feet under them, all of that. He took over a chaotic situation when he walked into East Lansing. So I think this is a program that can show some real growth and potentially jump up and scare some people. I want to see how good Aiden Childs is this season.
Okay. Northwestern has Preston Stone, the SMU transfer at quarterback. They have the largest transfer class in Northwestern history. Apparently got a little help from admissions in terms of allowing them to get there earlier and start being part of the team. Improvement from Northwestern.
Well, it was pretty bad last year. So I would say improvement. I don't know what to make of. I'm not going to sit here and rattle off a bunch of these names. Obviously, they believe in these transfers. I would still think this is going to be at least a year away for Northwestern, but this is there's a lot to hang your hat on with this program other than to say David Braun knows what he's doing.
Yeah, they won 2 games in conference last year, and the 2 teams they beat were 1-17 in Big Ten play. And one of those, the 2 teams are 2 teams we haven't touched on yet: Maryland and Purdue. Purdue, the new coach Barry Odom. Maryland, they had a number of guys drafted off of that team last year. I think they had 6 guys drafted, went 4-8. I fear that even though I really like what Mike Locksley has done overall, this is a wildly inexperienced team. They didn't score 30 points in a conference game all year last year. I'm not sure last year bottomed out. They may have to take another dip before they start building it back.
Well, Locksley said, he lost the locker room. They didn't, they didn't have continuity. They weren't really a team. And this is a challenge in this era where you're bringing in new guys, and guys are there because maybe they're getting a check or whatever. You got to be a little bit more like an NFL coach and build that brotherhood type philosophy real quick. He didn't have it. He thinks he's solved that problem, and that's going to be critical for Maryland. When it comes to Odom, here's the interesting thing with Purdue. Odom's doing a little what Signetti did, brought a lot of guys from a nice UNLV team.
Yeah.
Brought a lot of guys that he believes in, and there'll be some continuity that way. I don't know what the continuity index says, but he's got his guys from a quality UNLV team coming in. Purdue, 1-11, right? Last year? I think they only won 1.
That's right.
They'll do better. How much better? I don't know.
Be very difficult to do worse. They were 110th or worse in all of the major counting statistic categories on both sides of the ball. Half dozen games they were outscored by 35 points or more, and throwing a little gasoline on the fire with the rivalry with Indiana and their in-state FBS opponents last year. They were outscored 132-7.
Yeah. Barry knows what he's doing.
He does. He's
Purdue
a really good
will be
coach.
back. They will be back to respectability. I'm interested to see. It's just such a different era when you can bring your guys. You're like, man, I like what you did at UNLV. Great, I'll bring them. How'd you like to be UNLV? Well, we're going to find out how UNLV would have done. Last year's UNLV would have done in the Big Ten. It's going to win a few games.
So, Dan, that is a relatively exhaustive look for this type of format at the Big Ten, and yet never being exhausted is trying to cover this sport and what comes next. What did you make of the executive order issued by President Trump yesterday that was aimed at pay-for-play collectives? A lot of the language from my reading of it seemed slightly vague in there, so you're not really sure what type of significant impact, though it was certainly applauded by administrators in search of governmental intervention in order to help them get out of their own way, I guess.
Yeah, well, I was raised to in polite company to not discuss politics, religion, or whether the SEC should play 9 games. Right? You've got to stay away from those.
Lee Corso says politics, religion, and pass defense.
That's pass defense. There you go. Yeah. I didn't even know I was stealing his joke. Yeah. My apologies to the legend, Lee Corso. So I read this thing a few times, and I talked to some lawyers, and it's interesting. So an executive order to make this a little basic. You can order the federal government to do something. Like you could have an executive order that on federal land there's no speed limit, and that would happen with the signing, like immediately. Mm-hmm. These schools are not run by the federal government. The NCAA is not run by the federal government. So it's so it sounds like there's a hammer gavel coming down. That's not the case. If you really read it, what it really does is protect women's sports and non-revenue sports. Those are the actionable things. If your athletic department is over $125 million, which most major ones are, you have to add scholarships next year. According to this, now in women's sports and non-revenue, if you're between 25 million, 120 or 50 million and 125, you can't cut any. It's really a protection of that. Those are the actionable ones. Now, whether or not those are enforceable or legal, we don't know. But this is where we're at. It comes to the collectives and NIL and pay for play, extremely vague. It says, it basically says what we've been arguing about with the House settlement. You can't pay for play, but a legitimate NIL is allowed. Now, most of us would consider a legitimate NIL Jeremiah Smith getting paid to be in the EA Sports game, right? That's legitimate. Or Jeremiah Smith doing a car commercial in Columbus, Ohio. That would be legitimate. But as we've seen just earlier this week, the House settlement had to get revised a little to include the work of collectives. And collectives are now considered real NIL based on the House settlement. So if collectives, which could be paying somebody $100,000 for one Instagram post, is now legitimate under that, is that legitimate under this executive order? If you go to court, which invariably this will be, they have a much stronger case because they've been deemed legitimate collectives. So, when you're dealing with this, so I say this in the most nonpartisan way. This is obviously exactly what the NCAA wants. It couldn't have been written up better. But as with everything out of Washington, sometimes the hype isn't, that tax break you always seem to be hearing you're getting. Sometimes it doesn't seem to materialize. We'll wait and see what the actual impact of this is. It's a bold statement, and it certainly helps maybe get legislation, which actually matters, across the finish line. We'll see. But in terms of this, I think there's a lot more hype than what I would say immediate actionable things going down. That concludes my government 101 class here for the podcast.
My take on it, Dan, was that it was a message being sent that they want governmental intervention, something codified, whatever it might be, some type of parameters, and which I have not been a fan of. I want these people to work it out themselves. I know there's a long history that would suggest that's not going to happen and that they're incapable of doing so, but I would prefer the market to settle it and the collective bargaining to settle it. And ultimately, I still believe that's where this will wind up. How we get there is going to be an arduous path, but I think the executive order was more. I know you're 100% right, and it has to be popular across both aisles to say we're going to protect women's sports, we're going to protect the Olympic model, we're going to protect scholarships, all those. Who's against that, right?
Right.
That's hard to find anybody against that. The other with the NIL and the football, I felt like was a little bit more of a message to, okay, the executive branch, the president is behind this. I want this to get done and see if they're able to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm generally a fan of small government, free markets and all that. And I think the White House not overly stepping into that by declaring something else was somewhat telling. So figure this out. The problem they're going to have with this legislation is in the Senate. Can they get 60 votes? And that, everybody says, is a very uphill battle right now. So a lot of this is back to the drawing board. So very interesting. I've covered college sports for a long time. You have, I don't ever remember a president being that involved. I think like Obama once expressed some support for a playoff. Like there really is.
And he always filled out a bracket for the NCAA tournament.
He filled out a bracket. Like, Trump obviously goes to some college football games. Like Bill Clinton went to some college basketball games at Georgetown. He maybe would go or something like that. But to have this level of like interest out of the White House is alone somewhat historic.
And so maybe someday you and I will start a small government free market podcast. But
here we go.
I digress.
The Dan Wetzel ticket 2028. We will carry no states.
Well, no, I don't know about that. I've said what someone asked me about that, and I stole the line. I'm not even sure what old politician said it, but I said, if nominated, I will not run. If elected, I will not serve.
I will not be nominated. So don't do it.
Someone else. Dan, it was fun talking Big Ten. The great Dan Wetzel joining us. Again, congratulations to Pete and Kate Thamel on the arrival of their new daughter. College Game Day podcast always available to you wherever you prefer to download podcasts, or better yet, subscribe and never miss a single episode. We will continue our conference previews leading up to the start of fall practice.